Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We are doing it live right here. Weekday afternoons at 4 o'clock. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour after Ben Shapiro. Then just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money at 4. Live on the air right here, 790 KBC. Streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Today, coming to you live from Day 3 of the Milken Institute 2024 Global Conference in Beverly Hills, which has attracted about 4,000 movers and shakers from around the world, leaders in business, government, spanning the political spectrum, health, finance, technology, philanthropy, media, and the list goes on. Special coverage of this amazing gathering from around the world right here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Here at the conference later this hour, I'll be speaking with prominent Los Angeles attorney Richard V. Sandler, former chairman of the Jewish Federations of North America and Los Angeles, vice president of the Milken Family Foundation, and author of Witness to a Prosecution, The Myth of Michael Milken. He moderated several panels here at the conference, including addressing anti-Semitism and combating religious intolerance in the United States. Richard Sandler will be joining me later this hour. Advancing small business, a big topic of discussion here. And I'll be joined later this hour by Chris Pilkerton, the former head of the Small Business Administration during the Trump administration, author of the upcoming book, Plandemic. He had a front row seat to the 2020 pandemic and the government's massive response. He's currently Chief Legal and Regulatory Strategy Officer at Axion Opportunity Fund. Well, big finish to the Milken Institute Global Conference, a mixed finish to the stock market today. Stocks ended mixed, with the S&P 500 slipping slightly, just a fraction. The Dow coming in for a closing gain, though, of 172 points, ending higher for the sixth straight session. The NASDAQ composite pulled back 30 points. We got a mixed bag of corporate earnings today, weighing on some of the mega cap tech names throughout the session. In addition, investors appear to be assessing recent comments from the Fed officials, including Neil Kashkari, who addressed this conference this week. Joining us live now on Your Money, the Markets, and the Economy, GABRIEL Wisdom, who is Managing Director of American Money Management and author of Wisdom on Value Investing. GABRIEL Wisdom, thank you very much for coming to the line here, and give us your assessment of things here at the moment.
Well, Frank, you're right in the middle of something very exciting. On Monday, I was reading at the Milken Institute Global Conference in L.A., where you are. The topic of the Magnificent Seven came up in conversations, and everybody knows those seven stocks are responsible for about 37% of the broad market's 10.2% gain in the first quarter of this year. Last year, those seven companies were accounted for roughly two-thirds of the S&P 500's advance, and I understand there was some talk about the risks of piling into NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, Tesla, the so-called Magnificent Seven at these 50 times price earnings types of multiples, which makes sense. But you know what we're seeing here is a good deal of momentum. It's don't sell in May and go away. Generally, May is seasonally very soft, but it turns out from Thomas Lee Partners up in Boston, the seasonals are favorable when first quarter earnings are positive, as they were this year, and the stock market goes down as it did in April. So when that happens, the month of May is up 74% of the time. That dates back to 1928.
Thank you for sharing those historical insights with us here, and certainly the Mag 7 or the Fab 4 or the Mag 1 or the Magnificent 1 NVIDIA, all very much topics of conversation. Or Apple getting attention today. We see refreshing its iPad Air and iPad Pro lineups while talking up AI, by the way, reportedly working on its own AI server chips. Apple stock did close slightly higher. It's been rebounding lately, up around 183 here at the moment. What are your thoughts on Apple here?
What a monster. Also, their iPhone sales in China were up, as I recall, about 12% year over year, so that was very positive. On top of that, Apple is buying back $100 billion worth of its own stock. That's the largest buyback in history. The importance of buybacks is pretty simple. It tells investors how Apple or the other companies that are buying back their shares feel about the overall economic environment. Number two is Alphabet Google, also one of the Mag 7. They're buying back $70 billion of their own shares.
Also at this conference, the one and only Elon Musk. Tesla did not come up in the keynote conversation he had here at the conference, but Tesla certainly has been in the spotlight lately, and the stock has pulled back today by more than $3 to $174 and change. A lot of pressure on a lot of the EV makers, including Tesla. You've probably seen the latest reports about Fisker and Lucid and Rivian also. What are your thoughts on Tesla and this whole EV group here?
Well, there's a lot of competition coming for Tesla, and I'm sure Elon Musk is more aware of it than anybody. General Motors announced that after 60 years, they're discontinuing the production of the Chevy Malibu because they want to go EV, electric vehicle. I mean, that was one of the most successful cars ever made in the world. A 60-year run, 10 million vehicles, and now they go EV. Tesla has had some small wins in China. I thought it was interesting that Uber, the taxi-style company, shares fell quite a bit today, and the reason for it was concerns about robo-taxis from Tesla. So it's a force.
On the air live with Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management, and let's talk about what's happening with the other automakers. Ford, of course, also going into EVs in a big way. We got that electric Mustang there, and other things going on. What about the traditional automakers here, given what's going on right at the moment?
They're all going into somewhat of a soft period, Frank. The April Used Vehicle Index was released yesterday, and the monthly decline was a minus 2.5%. That annualizes at a minus 30% price depreciation annualized. And so there's a downside acceleration of used car prices, and we're seeing some inventory buildup of new cars. Now that's good because it spells future disinflation in the pipeline. But very exciting what all of the domestic automakers are doing, and the competition, I don't think, has ever been more fierce.
Right. You've seen those reports that some of these companies are losing big bucks on every single car. How long can that be sustained?
Yeah, that's
right?
The going out of business sale only lasts so long.
Very interesting. Well, we saw that report about Rivian today and Ford as well recently. What about, I don't think you have the laser eyes on just yet, but I know you do pay attention to what's going on with Bitcoin and the other cryptos, which have seen wild moves since Bitcoin hit an all-time high earlier this year. Right now it's hovering around 61,000. Cracked below 60K recently. Right now down about 900 here, around 61.2 here at the moment. What are your thoughts about what's happening in the crypto world?
Well, it's been an amazing couple of years for Bitcoin and the other cryptos. When FTX, the cryptocurrency exchange, went into bankruptcy due to fraud, that was only a couple of years ago. Bitcoin was around 16,000. Here it is at 61,000. These gains have been remarkable. I also thought it was interesting that FTX has billions of dollars more than it needs to cover what the customers lost in the November 2022 collapse. Very rare for creditors to get more than pennies on the dollar. It happened in the auto world back in 2021 when a car rental company, Hertz, came out of bankruptcy, and there was money left over to repay shareholders, but very, very unusual.
Right, and that is certainly one of the big stories today. Almost all customers of the collapsed cryptocurrency exchange FTX will reportedly get their money back and more, according to a court filing. FTX estimates that it owes creditors around $11.2 billion. FTX said that has between $14.5 billion and $16.3 billion to distribute to creditors. According to CNBC, customers whose claims amount to $50,000 or less will receive about 118% of the amount of their allowed claim. According to the plan, around 98% of creditors will receive that compensation. So that is certainly big news. That place, of course, was once run by Sam Bankman-Fried, the co-founder of FTX Cryptocurrency Derivatives Exchange. who's doing time in prison now. So that is very, very big news. Anything else that's getting your attention with these Bitcoin ETFs, which certainly helped that rally, and now talk maybe about an Ethereum ETF as well. Anything else that's getting your attention in that space?
Well, interest rates are a headwind for Bitcoin or anything that doesn't pay interest. When, for example, Warren Buffett is now sitting on more than $180 billion in cash. Berkshire Hathaway has been a net seller the last few months. They've got a lot of cash. That cash is earning just in money market better than 5%. When you get a decent return from cash, it's got to be difficult for assets that pay you nothing other than the promise to possibly go up in the future. And this week, we had 3 Fed governors tell us that we're probably going to see higher for longer, or at least longer, but not higher. On Monday, John Williams from the New York Fed said everything's in a good place right now. Don't change it. And then on Tuesday, we had Neil Kashkarian, as you mentioned, tell us that it's going to be higher for an extended period. And then yesterday, Boston Fed President Susan Collins said longer but not higher, but everybody's left the door open for possibly higher next year if needed.
Right. What's your gut feeling about where rates go from here, given inflation still running hot and tensions in the Middle East putting upward pressure on oil, which, by the way, is back up around 83 and change in London. That's the global benchmark, and still relatively high here in the United States, hovering around $80. So what's your expectation on inflation and rates this year?
I think they're going to stay higher for longer, Frank, but I'm not convinced they'll go.
We're all juggling life, a career, and trying to build a little bit of wealth. The Brown Ambition Podcast with host Mandy and Tiffany the Budgetnista can help.
When it comes to navigating your career, it really isn't a linear path. You just have to make the best choices with the information that you have at the time and just trust in the journey. Our job security is ourselves. It is our ability to bounce back. And if there's one thing that I've learned is that I'm always going to rise to the top.
Brown Ambition, wherever you listen.
Lower or higher anytime soon. There are 3 ways that recessions typically occur. Higher interest rates is at the top of the list. Monetary tightening, that generally does it when you get a credit crunch. Geopolitical crises that cause oil prices to rise dramatically, those have caused recessions historically. And then finally, speculative bubbles. We don't have one of those, of the concerns about bubbles in certain sectors, but these have all caused recessions. The geopolitical crises that might cause the price of crude oil to go up has happened so many times. The oil shocks of the 70s had happened again when Iraq invaded Kuwait back in 1990. The great financial crisis, we saw oil prices go to $150 a barrel because of strong Chinese demand. What's interesting now is the Chinese are trying to, a bit of a recession, and that may account for the lower oil prices.
One of the interesting points made during this conference, somebody mentioned in the past, geopolitical crises have had a relatively short term on the markets, and nowadays supply chains are being disrupted by a lot of these geopolitical disruptions. So it's not just the price of oil, but can ripple through the economy in so many ways.
There's no question about it. And global military spending, as you probably know, Frank, reached a record high of $2.4 trillion last year, and they're still buying. Countries are buying defense technology. And it's due to a global deterioration in peace and security, according to the Stockholm Peace Research Institute. Military expenditures have been rising for 9 straight years. And with the conflicts we're seeing on U.S. campuses and around the world, it's not too surprising.
On there live with Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management, based here in Southern California. Gabriel, let me ask you the big question here now. At this point, where are you putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, I'm looking at companies that buy back their own shares in this environment. Stock buybacks are really very, very strong. In fact, they're up 30% from a year ago. Some of those Magnificent Seven companies are big buyers, as I mentioned, Alphabet, Google, and Apple with a historic buyback. But there are others like ExxonMobil. Meta's been buying back their own shares. Marsh & McLennan, the insurance agency, Intuit, MasterCard, United Health Group. These companies are all buying back shares. Additionally, I'm looking now at the Dow underdogs. Again, the worst to first phenomena. The 10 worst companies from last year, a number of them did pretty well so far since their lows of last year. So I'm looking at those companies that make up the Dow 30. There's about 10 of them.
Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management and author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel Wisdom, thank you very much for taking the call here and what's turning out to be another big week, and appreciate you covering all the bases with us here. Gabriel, have a wonderful evening, and thanks again for taking the call tonight.
Thank you, Frank.
Let's get right out to the freeways now. We'll check where the action was on Wall Street in just a moment. Friends, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate. And Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with the insurance companies, and yes, if necessary, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of the injury are all part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in the process. The team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone right now under the word accident. That number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes Howard Jones and ABC with Haircut 100 to the YouTube Theater coming up on August 20th. Live Nation's Concert Week is here with $25 tickets to more than 5,000 shows. Tickets on sale now through May 14th at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, you guessed it, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you're caller 9. Call right now, 1-888-795-2222. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Mixed finish to the day on Wall Street. Big finish to the day at the Global Conference here in Beverly Hills. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 172 points at 39,056. The S&P 500 slipped a fraction to 5,188. And the NASDAQ down 30 at 16,303. The yield in the 10-year note is at 4.50%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates out there. Looks like it's eased this week. The price of oil moving higher in London, up 42 cents at 83.58 a barrel. That's the global benchmark. In New York, we see oil up 61 cents at 78.99 a barrel. Apple moving higher by 34 cents at 182 and change. Taking a look at the price of gold, down nearly 7 today at $2,315 and change. Silver down 5 cents at $27.56 an ounce. Checking the cryptos now, Bitcoin down about 900 at 61,249. Ethereum up 14 at 29.64, and Doge at the moment at 14 cents. On the consumer front, we see Walt Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery putting aside their rivalry to partner on a new streaming bundle that includes Disney Plus, Hulu, and Max. The two media giants announcing this afternoon that the new bundle will be offered beginning this summer, and among other things, the package would unite Disney Plus's Marvel and Max's DC universes. According to MarketWatch, Disney and WBD, along with Fox, and also planning to offer a joint sports streaming service to launch as soon as the fall. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC, coming to you from the Milken Institute Global Conference, a mega conference focusing on business. And with me now, the former head of the Small Business Administration, Chris Pilkerton, who has been on this program before. He's the author of the book Underserved. He has a new book coming out called Plandemic. Wonderful to connect with you. Chris, thank you very much for being with us. Give us your impression here and your message to the conference where you spoke just a few moments ago.
Frank, thanks so much for having me. This is my first time at the Milken Conference. It really is unbelievable. The quality, the talent, the information that's being shared is really incredible across all lines. Healthcare, city planning, and certainly small business, which is where my focus is and what I talked about this morning.
And you've done an amazing job, of course, leading the Small Business Administration back during the Trump administration, just before the pandemic. And, of course, small business was booming back then. Tell us the message here, how we can get back to that.
So really, I think as we look at kind of a post-pandemic small business world, we need to focus on access to capital. That's absolutely critical. And that public-private partnership between the government and the banks to ensure that there are market-based competitive solutions to ensure the small businesses are getting the capital that they need, coupled with the technical assistance. So the reality is that when you start a small business, usually folks are starting it based on their passion, their talent, and then they come into all kinds of different issues related to regulations, websites, legal needs, accounting needs. And so the technical assistance that can be provided both through nonprofit partners, but also through the corporate responsibility programs of a bunch of financial institutions are really critical. And I currently work at an organization called Axion Opportunity Fund, which is the leading CDFI to help small business communities. And we focus on that lending and focus on that technical assistance that's really critical, not just to help start, but to help small businesses scale.
Since you headed up the whole operation there, tell us about some of the programs some small businesses may not be even aware of at this point that are available to get that capital flowing.
Sure. So the first thing that everybody knows about, I think, is your small business loan. And the SBA itself does not actually make the loan. It goes through banks and through other financial institutions. The SBA guarantees the loan. So you don't necessarily call the SBA for the loan. You go into your local bank or CDFI or other organization. So that's one thing. The other thing that the SBA really has a great hand in is that technical assistance with the SBDC community, the SCORE community. And I encourage folks, if you're really interested in starting a small business and you want to figure out if it's right for you, just go walk into one of the 68 different offices around the country of the SBA. I've never worked with a bunch of people that are more committed to helping the communities that they're serving than I did with the career officials at the SBA. It was an honor to lead them. There are a number of other programs, so if you have a small business and you want to get a federal government contract, 23% of all federal government contracts are required to go to small businesses, so there's opportunities there. There's a private equity type component with something called a small business investment company, which is something that's another great program, but usually those businesses are a little bit larger on that end. But quite honestly, there's a whole panoply of programs, and going to the website is great, but walking in the front door is even better.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing those insights with us. And, of course, a lot of discussion now about the Trump-era tax cuts and whether they'll be extended or not. What do you see ahead as far as that's concerned, and how important are they for small businesses?
So I think one of the things that we focused on in the administration certainly was the tax cuts, and those were critical for small businesses. And I heard that from every city and every small business that I have the great honor to travel to and talk with. From there, the next piece of it is really going to be about deregulation. I think that the regulatory issues that exist, not just at the federal level, but certainly for small businesses at the state and county level, it can be really difficult for people trying to start a small business. So I think the deregulation piece is really important. Passage of the tax cuts to ensure that we have a vibrant economy is critical. And if you go back to 2018, 2019, pre-pandemic, one of the other issues that was really everywhere was workforce issues. And so I think the SBA playing a role in coordination with the Department of Labor can really help identify jobs and help get those people placed into those jobs.
In 2020, the unthinkable happened. The whole economy was shut down because of that pandemic. And I know you've given a lot of thought to what happened and had a front row seat to all of that. You have a new book called Plandemic. Tell us about that and tell us about those days.
So putting myself back in March of 2020, I walked into the White House and was working on the Paycheck Protection Program, which I'm sure many of your listeners remember. And the reality is that program was very critical to helping both small businesses and their workforce and keeping them attached. But I think we learned a lot from that program over the course of the year and a half, 2 years it was in place. And I think what we learned is there's a modernization in the government that we can really help advance. And I think that actually starts with the government, with the input of the private sector. And I think we need to be very intentional about it. One of the points that I make in the book is the ability for cities to be very resilient, for mayors and local economic development officials to really understand what the opportunities are for them. When I was back at the White House, back in that time period, I would have conversations with mayors and local economic development officials, and they just needed help kind of walking through.
We're all juggling life, a career, and trying to build a little bit of wealth. The Brown Ambition podcast with host Mandy and Tiffany the Budgetnista can help.
When it comes to navigating your career, it really isn't a linear path. You just have to make the best choices with the information that you have at the time and just trust in the journey. Our job security is ourselves. It is our ability to bounce back. And if there's one thing that I've learned is that I'm always going to rise to the top.
Brown Ambition, wherever you listen.
What the federal programs were, what the opportunities were, and that's fine. But by having sort of a playbook for what they can do going forward, that's what I argue for in the book, among a whole host of other recommendations.
When will that book be coming out, and will you have a book signing next year here?
I hope to, and hopefully in September of this year. It was a real joy to write. It's been a real passion for me, and I continue to try to help the small business community in any way that I can.
And since you've been here all week long, what are your big takeaways here? And how do you see this economy going from here? A lot of concerns now about a slowing, and inflation still a big consideration. How are you coming away from this conference?
So I come away from this conference inspired, but recognizing that there are a lot of headwinds for the economy generally, but obviously also for the small business community. And whether it's inflation or interest rates, those are things that are certainly dragging down the ability to allow small businesses to develop and scale. But what I will take from this conference is sort of the future of our economy. What can we do in the small business world and in the workforce world to really incorporate market-based and responsible artificial intelligence and other technologies to help skill and reskill the workforce of the future?
AI is certainly a big subject here, and how it'll impact the labor force. How do you see AI impacting the job front?
Well, I think we're going to have to be very creative on the job front. I mean, for example, when I was back at the SBA, I spent time down in North Carolina at the Manufacturing Solutions Center, and they were focused on bringing back domestic production that had gone overseas during globalization. And with incorporating advanced manufacturing into their process, they were able to get a lot of students from the North Carolina college system and the community college system to begin to code to sort of help with that. And the benefit of that was you had major retailers that were able to make their apparel products, their textile products, and were able to get them into the domestic pipeline much faster. It created jobs. It made products that were actually made in America. And it's a great example of what we can do, particularly not just in our business communities, but in the educational communities as well.
You're doing important work now at the organization. You mentioned how can people connect with you and learn more about that important work?
So if you go to www.aoffund.org, you'll find opportunities to examine our loan products, but also there's a lot of technical assistance material. We partner with large corporations to be able to develop some of these, and many, if not most of those products are actually free, and you do not necessarily need to take a loan to get them. So we're really trying to help all communities, but particularly underserved communities in the work that we do.
Chris Pilkerton, the former head of the Small Business Administration, author of the book that'll soon be out called Plandemic. Thank you very much for joining us here at the Milken Institute Global Conference in Beverly Hills on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
Thank you so much, Frank.
And certainly the SBA does an amazing job here in the Los Angeles area. After all the disasters we've seen over the years, business owners are always encouraged to apply for assistance and initiate a low-interest loan SBA application. Eligibility on all that based on the financial impact of whatever disaster, only not on any actual property damage. And if approved, you could possibly get an economic injury disaster loan, which basically working capital loans to help businesses, among other things. Disaster loans can provide vital economic assistance to small businesses to help overcome the temporary loss of revenue they are experiencing. So we have seen this over and over again. Typically, these loans have about a 4% interest rate for small businesses and a 3.25% interest rate for private, non-private organizations, with terms up to 30 years, shorter terms available as well. A lot of Business leaders attending the Milken Institute Global Conference, including Tracy Hernandez, the president and CEO of Los Angeles BizFed, LA BizFed here, which is, of course, the confederation of the chambers of commerce and all the business groups here in Los Angeles County. LAEDC represented as well, and also the LA Area Chamber of Commerce with Maria Salinas here. A lot of movers and shakers from Southern California interacting with the top leaders around the world here at this conference. Stay tuned. We'll have more coverage for you in just a moment. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. And joining me now, prominent Los Angeles attorney Richard Sandler, who has headed up the Jewish Federations of North America as well as the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles. Following the latest news here, Mr. Sandler, give us your impressions of what's happening. You just moderated a discussion on anti-Semitism, which has been sweeping college campuses. Give us your impressions here.
It's a time of great concern. I think anti-Semitism has raised its ugly head in a way that none of us ever believed we would see in our lifetime. But when we step back, we realize that this is really an attack on our entire way of life, on Western culture, on the United States of America. Even to this morning, I think I saw a demonstration, pro-Palestinian demonstration in New York, in which they defaced, I think, a World War II memorial. What does that have to do what's happening in the Middle East? This shows what it is. It's an attack on America. It's an attack on capitalism. It's an attack from outside of the United States. It's not an accident that it's only 30 colleges and universities and that have encampments and another 30 that have had demonstrations. There are something like 3,000 colleges and universities in this country. Is there no one that cares on those campuses? No, these are campuses that get a lot of attention. They've been targeted by outside influences to try to disrupt our way of life, and it is of concern.
And in these reports, rarely is it even mentioned that all of this is happening following the Hamas attack on Israel back on October 7th, which started this war.
Correct. So there's complaints that people want a ceasefire. They want Israel to stop killing civilians. We all want innocent civilians to survive. Nobody's in favor of killing innocent civilians, whether they live in Gaza, whether they live in Darfur, whether they live in Israel, no matter whether they live in China, no matter where they live. And there's a war going on that Israel did not start, but people in it, that over 1,200 people of its citizens were literally massacred in the most savage way that I think any of us have ever seen in our lifetime. And it's trying to defend itself. It's probably the only country on the planet that has to defend itself or trying to defend itself. But I think it's going out of its way today to do it in as much as a humanitarian way as it can, and to put an end to Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. So it's a very difficult time, but we also know that this is not being generated, from the people in Gaza. It's being generated from Iran.
Much attention has been focused on the funding these groups are getting, and indeed the universities have been getting as well. Among the movers and shakers you talked to, what about that part of the story?
I think people are concerned about how much money. This is not, by the way, this didn't happen started in October. This started probably 20 years ago when a lot of foreign money was going to these universities. Some of these universities actually put satellite campuses in some different countries, and professors were hired that no longer were interested in teaching debate, teaching respect for people that have different points of view, and a search for the truth. It's now become a matter of propaganda, indoctrination of students. Universities reflect what else is going on in our society. We see it on social media, we see it in the news, we see it in our political campaigns. Everything is a battle. The world has been reduced to a very simplest binary point of view. You're either an oppressor or you're an oppressed. And yes, the college campuses have been building for over 20 years to get to where they are today.
Mr. Sandler, anything else you'd like to mention at this point, given what's happening here in the Los Angeles area? Of course, Israel has received a tremendous display of support in Beverly Hills with that display of about 1,400 flags, as well as American and other flags representing the people who were killed back on October 7th. And United Hatzalah recently received a tremendous amount of support. And what are your thoughts about the support for Israel here and where things go from here?
Look, I think we still take a lot of pride in the fact that in our country, right and wrong still does mean something. I think the majority of this country, overwhelmingly from recent polls shows, supports Israel in trying to defend its democracy and defend its people. So I think that's great. And I think we should realize that, again, this is an assault on America, and we should all be concerned. There's some people used to say that, the Jewish community is the canary in the coal mine. If it starts there, it doesn't end there. And I think if we look around and we look where the funding's coming from and we look how these protests are being funded and how they all start to resemble each other, I think that we should all be a little bit concerned and use whatever means are available to put them down, to make sure that the protesters have a right of free speech, but not to violate the law and violate other people's rights. And then, I'm hopefully in some of these universities that they will enforce their rules and their laws.
Mr. Sandler, thank you very much for being generous with your time. I know that you have an open line here. Richard Sandler, prominent Los Angeles attorney, former chair of the Jewish Federations of North America and Los Angeles. Thank you very much for joining us here once again.
Again, Frank, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Richard V. Sandler, who also serves as vice president of the Milken Family Foundation, author of the new book, Witness to a Prosecution, The Myth of Michael Milken. Congratulations on that comprehensive book, and I look forward to discussing that with you in our next conversation. Richard Sandler moderating several panels here, including the one addressing anti-Semitism and combating religious intolerance in the U.S., and also a number of the other panels. So it's been a tremendous honor to be here with you and the rest of this magnificent global conference. We did hear from Elon Musk this week. Elon Musk discussed everything except Tesla in his conversation on stage. Elon Musk talked about colonizing Mars, stemming the tide of illegal immigration, free speech, and declining birth rates around the world. AI was another big theme here at the conference. One big tech-focused firm saw incredible innovation and new products driving efficiency, especially in the back office. And, of course, the impact on all this on jobs remains to be seen. Investors like U.S. assets, but they're cautious on the rest of the world. According to Heyman Capital CIO Kyle Bass at this conference, he said, don't focus your capital outside of North America right now because the rest of the world has real problems. Real estate was also a big focus here. We heard from some investors talking about that, including Centerbridge co-founder and managing principal Jeff Aronson said commercial real estate sentiment is negative enough that he's so attracted to it. So maybe commercial real estate's bottomed out. And former Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin here as well said the currency's an advantage in helping the U.S. finance large fiscal deficits for now. He said whoever wins the presidential election will need to rein in the federal debt burden. Mnuchin also said he is still interested in acquiring TikTok's U.S. unit. Mixed finish for the stock market today, with the Dow coming in for a closing gain of 172 points. The S&P 500 slipped a fraction. The NASDAQ closed down 30 points, and the yield in the 10-year note now at 4.50%. Bitcoin all over the place, down about 900 now at 61,200. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be doing more at 4 tomorrow afternoon right here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
How wrestling really works and how you get the ratings. Eric Bischoff and Conrad Thompson explain on 83 Weeks.
This is indeed the first WrestleMania without Vince McMahon.
I mean, it's about as horrible as it can get, but does erasing that history make it any better?
Everybody's being careful not to celebrate Vince McMahon. I think you can acknowledge him without celebrating him. I think that's the double-edged sword that everybody's sort of carrying for now.
83 Weeks on YouTube or wherever you listen.